Hello, bruv. We're back with grandmother's stories. Yankee Point. We went to housekeeping in a log house built on the bank of the river, where now there is a wharf and warehouse. Uncle Sam had built it for himself when he first moved to the place, but this year he had finished the frame house, the only one in the place, and had gone to live in it. I dare say you young people think it would be a terrible affair to live in a log house, but the pioneers of this country were very glad to get a good log house to live in. Ours was one of the best in the place. It had 2 large rooms, one the living room with a great fireplace at one end where we did all our cooking, for there were no stoves in those days. The whole world cooked by fireplaces, and where we ate and sat to sew and slept too, for there was a big bed in one corner where Father and Eber slept. The other room was a bedroom and also a storeroom where the flour, meal, and sugar were kept, where also there was a barrel of whiskey, for it was the fashion of those times for everyone to keep whiskey and drink it too, though my father was a very temperate man and Eber never would taste it. Yes, continued Grandma, it was good enough house for anyone, and I kept it perfectly clean. The floor was white enough to eat from, and the deal table was scoured until it shone, and every dish and pan glistened. They didn't look much as they do in my kitchen now, where there are 2 servants who have nothing to do but to keep things bright. Well, said Grandma with a sigh, the times are different from what they used to be. The children looked as if they were glad of it, but wisely said nothing. The greatest drawback to our happiness was sickness. Everybody had fever and ague, and no one, not even the doctors, knew how to cure it. It was before the advance in the methods of making medicines had begun, and when doses of 30 grains of calomel were not uncommon. I was sick one whole year with chills and fever, and always when the doctor came it was calomel and jalap he prescribed. I had grown worse instead of better, and by the end of the year was reduced almost to a skeleton. I made up my mind at last that as the medicine did me no good, I wouldn't take any more of it. So the next time Eber came with a spoonful of the nasty stuff, I put my hand over my mouth and turned my head away and wouldn't take it. He said I'd die if I didn't, and I replied, I'd rather die than live the way I am living. When Father came in, he tried to persuade me to take it, but I was firm in my resolve never to take any more of it, come what would. From that time I began to get well, and was very soon up and about the house. No one knows what the pioneers of the western states suffered from malaria. Bad doctors and worse medicine. Quinine, the only specific for the disease, was then unknown. One poor man who lived near us was reduced to skin and bone, and of course was with calomel and jalap 3 times a day he couldn't have an appetite. Someone had told him that if, when the fever was at its height, he would go down to the river and jump in, the shock to his system would break the fever. The poor fellow tried it, and it did indeed break the fever in him too, for he died in a congestive chill a few hours after. Sometimes during the first year there were hardly enough well people to take care of the sick. After I got well, I sat up many nights with our sick neighbors and helped them in every way I could, for in pioneer days everybody knows who is his neighbor. There is not the doubt about it that there is in older settled countries and in cities. At the end of 2 years, Sally came, and it was not so lonely for me. When we had been there 3 years, the father of a little 2-year-old boy, whose mother had just died, wanted us to keep the boy for a while, until he got settled somewhere. Father said he didn't care if I was willing, and I was willing, he came. And as I was willing, he came. He was just beginning to talk and was very pretty and attractive, and we loved him a great deal. His father was very poor and could do nothing for him, and we were not rich ourselves, so I made him clothes out of our old ones. We kept him 2 years, and when Father concluded to take us away on account of the unhealthiness of the place, he said he must send Benny to his father. I begged Father to keep him. I told him I could make clothes for him out of his old ones, and that what he ate wouldn't cost much, and if it was necessary, I'd share my food with him. Benny cried too and begged to stay. He said Emily would make towdies for him out of Gampa's old ones, and he could eat off them. Emily's plate, and he would be a good boy and work, but Father thought he couldn't stand the extra expense. I have always been sorry, said Grandma, that we didn't keep him. It would have been better for him. What became of him, said one of the mammas. He finally got to be a Methodist minister, a very good man, but uncultivated. I saw him once many years afterward, but it didn't seem as if he ever could have been our little Benny. He got off a good joke on Sally that afforded us a great deal of amusement. She came down late to breakfast one morning looking rather unamiable, as people who are late to breakfast usually do, and she spoke quite sharply to him. He came out where Eber and I were busy fixing a sail for his new boat, and holding up his tiny forefinger at us, he lisped with an air of great solemnity and caution, "Look out, Shalleyeth hath spunkieth of what hath spunkieth of what?" He repeated with great emphasis. He looked so droll that we screamed with laughter, and we never ceased to tease Sally about being spunky of the what. The sail we were making, I'm guessing he meant wasp. The sail we were making for that boat was the cause of Eber's disobeying me one out of the 2 times he ever did disobey me while we were young. One was when he would take some white sugar when I didn't want him to. "Oh, tell us about that," said Porty. "For ordinary purposes we used maple sugar, which was made in abundance in the neighborhood, but for sickness we had loaf sugar, which at that time came in cakes of 40 or 50 pounds. We always kept this kind of sugar, but used it very sparingly for company and for sickness in our own house, and for our poorer neighbors who couldn't afford to buy it. Eber was always very generous and self-denying, but this one time he said he was going to have a piece of that sugar. I told him he couldn't have it, and he replied he was almost as old as I was anyway, and he would have it, and he did," said Grandma laughed. "I have often wondered since why he minded me as he always did, except these 2 times. He must have been a very good boy." "Tell us about the sail, Grandma," said little Emily. "Well, we finished the sail in the evening, and Eber made up his mind that in the morning he would try it, and as it was the first big sail he had ever owned, he was very enthusiastic about it. Morning came, but it was very windy, and the waves were running high, and I told him he must not go out until the wind died down. After breakfast was over, he went down to the river, and he made up his mind that his boat would go in a wind like that well enough. Of course, Emily wouldn't want him to go, but Emily was a girl anyhow, and what did she know of boats? So he came up to the house, got his sail, and was making off without saying a word to anybody when I rushed out and told him he must not go. He would certainly be drowned. "Oh," he said, "I guess not. It isn't much of a wind, anyway." I implored, I begged, I commanded him not to go, but it was no use. He didn't say much, but he walked on and began to fix the sail in the boat. Then he put in the rudder, raised the sail, arranged the ropes, keeping the sheet rope in his hand, and pushed off. I sat on the bank watching him with fear and trembling. It all went very well until he got over the channel bank, when a big gust of wind came and launched the boat over. At the same moment, a big wave leaped into it, and but for Eber's presence of mind, the boat certainly would have gone over, and he would have been drowned. For father was away, and there was no boat and no man to save him. But he had had some doubts of his own in regard to the safety of the experiment, and had taken a hatchet with him, and as soon as the squall struck the sail, he let go the sheet rope. But as that didn't right the boat, quick as a thought, he seized the hatchet, and with a few quick strokes, the mast and sail fell into the water, the boat righted, and he was safe. I believe I cried then, but when he got on shore I didn't cry much. I gave him a good scolding, which he received with great meekness. "Did he get back his sail?" said Porty. "Yes, after the storm was over, he found it lodged against the bank, not far away." "All right, Bob, that's all."